On January 1, 2019, the world changed. Gates, monsters, system, players, these new concepts sprang up from nowhere. Those who protect and those who invade. These two powers fought all over the world. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. On November 4, 2024, all players received a message from the system. Frost Queen, the final boss for the area Earth, has appeared. Upon her defeat, safe zones will be added. The final boss. If we just defeat her, we can go back to our normal lives. Countless players were filled with newfound determination and their hope was rekindled. One day, that was how long it took for hope to become despair. On the day that the Frost Queen walked out of the gate, the Southern Pacific froze over with a flick of her wrist. Everyone's determination froze along with it. There were only 5 people who remained undeterred. These top players took a plane to Antarctica. Final Dungeon Antarctica, the Queen's Nest, 2nd floor. The 5 players stood in front of the stairs leading to the next floor. A message popped up that only one person may go up the stairs. Are you fucking kidding me? After coming all this way? A muscular man stomped the floor with a loud bang as he swore, "Doesn't that mean that the other 4 will die here?" From the moment they entered the nest, they were chased by the Frost Queen's breath. They had to keep climbing to avoid getting frozen by the poisonous breath. In other words, if only one person could ascend, then the remaining 4 would freeze to death. There are only 2 minutes left until the breath catches up. We have to make a decision, the great mage Skaya said as she looked to the others. I think Specter should go, he has the best chance of killing the Frost Queen, she said. I could kill her too, muscular giant exclaimed. And who would win in a fight between you two, she asked. TSK, touche. The muscular giant raised his hands in surrender. The man wearing a cowboy hat, Gilberto Green, nodded in agreement. I agree, with the exception of Specter. Our odds against the Frost Queen aren't too great. That's true, he was right. Ramadat Kali had great physical strength, but that wouldn't be a match for the Frost Queen. If she did as much as breathe or raise her hand, the entire area around her would freeze. Then it's settled. The 4 of them turned to look at Specter. He wore a black mask. Are you sure you won't regret this? A dry voice spoke from behind the mask. Ramadat shrugged at his question. Regret? We probably will, a whole fucking lot, but what can we do? You have the best chance of succeeding. Specter looked at his faithful teammates. If he was the one that was left behind, could he cheer them on so casually? He couldn't. Biting his lip under his mask, he gave a heavy nod. I'll see you again. I promise. His teammates laughed and waved him off, telling him that they understood, so he should get going. With that empty promise, Specter ran up the stairs, skipping multiple steps at a time. He didn't look back. He didn't even have time for that. Even when the stair crumbled behind him and he couldn't hear his comrades' voices anymore, his eyes remained fixed at the top of the stairs. At that moment he reached the top of Frost Queen. The final boss for the area Earth has appeared. Upon her defeat, safe zones will be added. The Frost Queen sat on a frozen throne in the middle of the room. Her legs were crossed, her demeanor elegant and aloof, but Specter wasn't fooled by her alluring appearance. The aura that she radiated threatened to freeze everything around her. The sound of the weapon being drawn seemed to lower the temperature. Specter spoke in a flat voice. 5 years. That's how long it had been since the world changed into something similar to a game, so let's end this in this? The Frost Queen burst out in laughter, covering her lips with her slender fingers. Darkness surged around him and the ice started to turn dark. The best player in the world, Specter Seo Jun-ho, opened his mouth and said, all I need to confirm is your death, and the end of this game. Darkness and ice clashed, creating a massive explosion. They fight and fight. Frost Queen attacked with green laser, but Specter dodged, and with a swift flashy move Specter gave a big wound to Frost Queen. Ha, ha. At the end of a long battle, the Frost Queen let out a violent cough. Her complexion was pale, but a smile teased at the edge of her lips, and said, I had fun. I didn't. With a sullen voice, an exhausted Seo Jun-ho swung his broken sword with as much force as he could muster. The Frost Queen's head was no different from other living organisms. It was cut through cleanly. At the same time, a message rang in his ears that is saying, congratulations. Frost Queen, the boss for Area Earth, has been defeated. You have received the title Bringer of Spring. Safe zones have been created on Area Earth. Few. Seo Jun-ho let out a long breath. It turned white in the cold air. He did it. It had been 5 years since the world became a living hell. He finally enacted revenge on the monsters that stole his normal life. He looked at the ground in shame and exhaustion. At that moment a hellhound crawled out from the ground and started chewing at the Frost Queen's body. After it finished its scrumptious meal, the hellhound spat something out before it disappeared, a nucleus. It was a power source that some of the monsters used. It was also a new energy source that had recently been in the spotlight. My friends sacrificed themselves. With a horrified expression, Seo Jun-ho reached down to pick it up, but when he picked it up, a dizzying amount of messages appeared. But a sudden message popped up saying, warning. You have started to absorb the Frost Queen's nucleus absorption percentage 0.001%. Because of the cold it radiates, the Frost Queen's nucleus will cause your stats to drop to level 1. Strength 217-21, Stamina 201-24, Speed 225-26, Magic 183-18. What? Startled, Seo Jun-ho wanted to drop the nucleus, but it had already started to melt through his skin. Frost started to spread on his skin and he felt his blood flow as his heartbeat slowed. The horrible chill filled his veins and his body. His joints went cold and his chin shook uncontrollably, causing his teeth to chatter. This crazy dungeon, Seo Jun-ho felt his consciousness slip and freeze.
Scene change in the future. Someone asked everyone, what's on November 11th?
In the past, they would have answered Pepero Day, but the answer changed in the year 2024. It is now the Day of Heroes. The Day of Heroes, after 2024 November 11th, became the day that the 5 heroes saved the world. From the middle of October to the beginning of November, tickets to Korea sold like crazy. There was a simple reason. On that one day the frozen statues of the 5 heroes were put on display at the Seoul History Museum, the result of such a world that was overrun with monsters. Thousands of people sat in their seats, listening to the suit-clad curator on stage. She spoke in Korean, but thanks to the live translation system, there was no one who couldn't understand her. In 2024, a monster that humanity could not quell appeared. A kindergartner wearing a yellow hat raised their hand and yelled, "The Frost Queen, I heard from my teacher." "That's right, our young friend is smart," the curator said with a smile. The Frost Queen was a monster that could freeze the southern Pacific with one wave of her hand, while everyone else lost hope. 5 people had hope in their hearts as they traveled to Antarctica. The lights on the stage flicked off. The curator swallowed as she looked at the audience. She pulled her hand back. The curtain was pulled aside and 5 frozen statues stood behind a reinforced glass wall. "Today, we call them the 5 heroes, please be respectful." Cameras flashed all over. The audience was captivated by the statues. Some closed their eyes and said a prayer of thanks. Thanks to the 5 heroes, the Frost Queen was defeated and numerous safe zones appeared. Additionally, as the curator launched into a deep explanation, the kindergartner pointed, eyes wide, the statue moved. "Oh, I'm sorry, that's not true." The curator smiled and shook her head. "The temperature behind the wall is regulated 24/7, so there won't be." Crack. The curator paused at the peculiar sound and turned around. She cautiously took a step forward to check the statues beyond the wall. The sound had come from the direction of Specter's mask-wearing statue. She let her gaze linger for a moment, and the statues had been fine for 25 years. Well, as I was saying, there wouldn't be any problems. She had barely gotten the words out of her mouth when one of the statues shattered and a person fell to the ground. System messages filled his eyes and ears. Absorption percentage 99.9999%, absorption percentage 100%. Congratulations, you have completely absorbed the Frost Queen's nucleus. You have received the new skill. Frost level has been initialized. What the hell? It's cold. He slowly raised his gaze, meeting the eyes of a shocked audience. What in the world is going on? He's moving. Holy shit, he's alive. Specter is alive. Hey, someone call a doctor, right now. Everyone shouted in amazement. Big news started to spread. In an instant the audience erupted into a clamor of noises. Lying on his hospital bed, Seo Jun-ho folded and put away the newspapers he had been reading. So, it's been 25 years. He blinked once and just like that, 25 years had passed. The situation was so ridiculous that he wasn't particularly shocked or dumbfounded. At first, he wondered if it was something like a hidden camera prank, but there was too much evidence against that. "My muscles are gone, they've completely atrophied." Seo Jun-ho stared down at his body, dumbfounded. He was so thin that his bones were visible. He had taken a nap, and just like that, the body he trained vigorously for 5 years was gone. "Specter Nim, the president of the Players Association has come to see you." The top doctors of the world spoke to him with both hands clasped together. That was the least they could do to show respect to the savior of humanity. Seo Jun-ho wasn't uncomfortable with this, because this was the treatment he had always received. "Is the president someone I know?" Specter asked. If he was a stranger then he would tell them to leave. It hadn't even been a day since he woke up. He didn't want to be bothered already, but the doctor said yes. The president spoke casually and said you were their friend. "Friend, huh? There weren't many whom he considered a friend. Well, I suppose I'll know once we meet." Seo Jun-ho turned to look out into Seoul. He was amazed how the world has changed. There were many more skyscrapers and magic must have been used because the fine dust pollution was gone. More than that, there wasn't a single gate in Seoul when previously they had been all over the place. It's the peaceful world that we wanted. Thinking of his comrades, Seo Jun-ho closed his eyes and smiled faintly. He is thinking what he will do now that the world had changed. When he was 20 and he became a player and cleared gates, the only thing he knew how to do was to hunt monsters. "I guess I'm unemployed now." It wasn't an unpleasant thought. With an unburdened heart, he pulled off his mask. Damn, just look at this handsome-ass man. Who was Specter? Besides his Korean nationality, he had always been a mystical figure whose name, age and face were unknown, so how could he take off his mask so casually? The doctors are shocked by that and they asked why did he take off his mask. Seo Jun-ho just said he don't need it anymore as he twirled his trademark mask in his hands and said the world is peaceful now. A shadow crossed over the doctors' faces. Seo Jun-ho noticed the shift and asked why this reaction, but before the doctors say anything the door opened and a man entered saying he will explain everything. Upon seeing his face, Seo Jun-ho's eyes went wide. He had a few wrinkles now, but it was a face that he would never forget. It was his friend's Diaku. He screamed his name. The doctors turned their heads away as they held back their laughs by hearing Diaku's name. The man turned to the doctors, his face slightly red. "I want to speak with him in private." After the doctors walked out, the president pulled up a chair and took a seat. His eyes started to water. "Jun-ho, you still look exactly the same." Even after 25 years his friend Seo Jun-ho was still exactly the same. He himself was at the age that his skin had started to wrinkle and his stomach started to stick out, but Jun-ho still looked exactly as he looked when he was younger, but his healthy body had deteriorated to the point that he looked sickeningly skinny. The president bit his lower lip. For some reason he felt his heart aching. Seo Jun-ho is amazed by the fact that Diaku really is his childhood friend Shim Diaku. Seo Jun-ho stared with amazement at his friend who had become a middle-aged man. He started laughing as he noticed a M-shaped sign bowling in his friend's head. Shim Diaku sighed and said, "That's all you have to say after all this time." But again the Seo Jun-ho he knew had always been like this. Seo Jun-ho is laughing hard while gripping his stomach and said it's been 25 years and still he didn't get any cure for balding? These two really did like to speak of such trivial things. Considering how they were two grown men, they had a lot to talk about as they went from topic to topic without a moment to breathe. Shim Diaku would usually start talking and Seo Jun-ho would peel clementines from the basket as he chimed in. "A few hours passed just like that." Shim Diaku smiled fondly and said, "You rascal, you're still exactly the same." Even after 25 years, the two friends who were born and raised together were still the same. Diaku had actually been nervous on the way to the hospital. He was scared to show Junho the adult he had become, but now, they were still talking as freely as before. After some time Seo Jun-ho spoke up, "Now that you're not so tense anymore, tell me why those doctors reacted like that." Shim Diaku gets a serious face and said, "The moment you guys defeated the Frost Queen, all the players received the same message, that is congratulations, the Frost Queen has been defeated, safe zones will now appear on the area Earth." The whole world rejoiced. They didn't need to fight anymore, they could live peacefully like before. Players and non-players alike cried tears of joy, but the message didn't stop there. Massage came like a dimension elevator has been unlocked in the Pacific area. The second floor frontier area has opened. The max level in the frontier will be raised from 80 to 120. Stay strong until you reach the last floor. Everyone in the world cursed at this. They are pretty angry. People fell into panic after that. They all thought that it was the end, but it was actually only the beginning. They received the message that the only way to stop Earth's destruction is to go up the floor. Seo Jun-ho asked so, and hearing that Shim Diaku explained that Seo Jun-ho said that's not what he wanted to know. Shim Diaku said there are 10 floors in total. After hearing that, Seo Jun-ho relaxed a bit. He thought he and his teammates had taken 5 years to clear the first floor to defeat the Frost Queen, and since it has been 25 years, the humans should reach at least 7th floor by now. After finishing his calculations, Seo Jun-ho looked back at Shim Diaku and asked, "What floor are we on right now?" Shim Diaku opened and closed his mouth a few times before squeezing his eyes shut. Feeling nervous, Seo Jun-ho urged him to answer, but there was a long silence. Shim Diaku let out a long sigh and opened his eyes. "In the past 25 years, all we've cleared is the 2nd floor." Upon hearing that, Seo Jun-ho's mind went blank. He collapsed and lay on his fluffy bed and stared at the ceiling. Finally, he spoke again just to say shit. Shim Diaku said he doesn't have anything to say. Seo Jun-ho said it's been 25 years, and you guys only clear the 2nd floor? Shim Diaku said, "I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses, but there's a reason for this." Seo Jun-ho sat up with an angry look and told to speak what the excuse was. The Frost Queen's nucleus. As soon as the words left his mouth, Seo Jun-ho started to tremble. Without noticing it, Shim Diaku continued, "The 3rd floor resembles a volcanic region. Most players can't even withstand the environment. We decided that it's impossible to launch an attack, and we searched for any possible means to withstand the heat. There's an altar where the lava originates. If we freeze it with the Frost Queen's nucleus, the environment will change." Seo Jun-ho asked if they find it or not. Shim Diaku hung his head and covered his face with his hands and said, "I'm ashamed. We searched the nest countless times, but we couldn't find it." Well, of course they wouldn't be able to find it because Seo Jun-ho had absorbed it after all. Seo Jun-ho rolled his neck and stretched his arms and said, "There's nothing else you could have done. He guessed it was just bad luck." Shim Diaku looked touched after hearing that. Seo Jun-ho understand, even after we wasted all his efforts? He thought he didn't notice when they were younger, but was Seo Jun-ho always this mature? At the same time, the two friends felt embarrassed for judging the other too quickly. The Seo Jun-ho he knew would have thrown a fit, but he currently had a pure look in his eyes that didn't help in hiding his guilt. They started talking around lunch and continued until Seoul was brightly lit up by the neon lights. Feeling hungry after talking and gossiping for 7 hours, Shim Dyaku checked the time and spoke, "Wow, it's already this late, aren't you hungry? Wanna grab something to eat?" After debating for a moment, Seo Jun-ho shook his head and said no, he is fine, but he has a favor to ask. Dyaku asked, "What is it?" Seo Jun-ho said he wants to visit the museum. Shim Dyaku knew why. He thought this rascal, he misses his teammates. Actually, he knew that Seo Jun-ho would ask about it. He already made preparations beforehand. Even though he acted aloof, he treasured his friends as much as himself. Shim Dyaku pulled out a bracelet and placed it on the bed. Seo Jun-ho blinked and said, "Wow, technology sure has come a long way. Is this the famous Seoul History Museum?" Shim Dyaku explained, "This is Vita. It's similar to a computer. Live interpretation, calling internet maps payment. You can basically do anything with it." Seo Jun-ho asked why did he giving this to him. While he wrapping it around his wrist, Seo Jun-ho looked at his friend with a new light. "Come back to the hospital when you're done. The doctors want to monitor your condition for a while," Dyaku said. With that, Dyaku stood up and leave. Seo Jun-ho pulled off his patient gown and pulled on his clothes, which had been cleaned. There wasn't a huge difference in fashion now that he was in 2049. Seo Jun-ho left the hospital with a small smile on his face. After some time inside the museum, there were monster models, hides and bones along with the battle gears from the famous players of the past. Seo Jun-ho walked around casually. He looked at the display cases and eventually arrived in front of the morgue. As soon as the door opened, white smoke started to flow out. This chill, this feeling, the morgue felt eerily similar to the Frost Queen's nest. He thought this must be the place. He didn't feel good about it. It seemed that his comrades couldn't escape from the Frost Queen's grasp, even in death. He reached the center of the morgue and stared hard at the 4 statues: the Great Mage, Skya Killaland, the King of Destruction, Ramadat Kali, the Grey Envoy, Gilberto Green, the Sky Phoenix, Tenmei Mio. They were his comrades, his reliable friends. "I'm sorry, I'm late." For him, it was only 3 days ago when he promised to see them later, but he never imagined that he would only be able to keep his promise in this manner 25 years later. Seo Jun-ho plopped onto the cold ground. "Do you guys know? The world has gotten a lot better. Have you heard of the self-driving taxis?" He explained the piece they had brought together. He wasn't great with words, but he used his hands to explain every single detail and told them to rest in peace. He pulled a bottle of alcohol from his inventory and poured a bit in front of each of his teammates. He drank that alcohol and smiled at his teammates. After seeing clearly, he saw some dust on his friend's ice statue. Suddenly he saw some system massage that shattered his world. The massage's effect of the skill Frost has been checked. The ice seal can be removed with Frost. Your base magic stat is absurdly low. Removal failed. His eyes widened as he read over the 3 lines. As if he was possessed, Seo Jun-ho touched the ice statue again. The same message popped up, but his mind was already racing. "I can remove the seal? Me?" Shim Dyaku had said that the ice couldn't be melted even with the current technology or even with player skills, but it seemed that he could do that with the Frost skill. Taking deep breaths to calm himself, Seo Jun-ho fell into thought. He would have to check his current stats before he did anything else. Status window. As soon as he muttered the words, a small hologram window appeared. It was one of the abilities the system gave to the players. In background we saw Seo Jun-ho, level 1, titled as Bringer of Spring, strength is 21, stamina 24, speed 26, magic 18. Frost EX, Watchguard of Darkness S, Hunter's Knight A, Hero's Mind A, Weapon Mastery A, Strong Intuition B. Original abilities have been drastically reduced. Original abilities will be restored as time passes and as you level up. He glanced at the special status section and his eyes started to glow with hope. He had the Frost skill. This is the key. This was the key to saving his friends. Not only that, but it had skipped right over the S grade and directly became an EX grade skill. He take a closer look at his status window. He dropped from level 80 to level 1 and his stats were depressingly low, but it wouldn't be that way forever. He will be able to restore them. He tried supplements and magic boosting items, but his low magic stat had always made things harder for him back then. Eventually he let out a long frustrated sigh before he spotted something. A new section popped up below the status window. Seo Jun-ho trembled in silence. He read over the title's effects several times saying, "These are the effects?" He thought that his stats would increase just a bit, like what happened with Skya, but this is crazy. It's on a completely different level. To be honest, the 500% recovery rate for stamina and magic would be nice to have, but he could live without it. However, the second effect was different because all stats will increase by 30 every time I move up a floor. In other words, the effect would activate whenever he went up a floor with the dimensional elevator. Assuming that he could reach the 10th floor, all his stats would increase by at least 270 by then. In amazement he said, "Oh my god, damn, bro got the ultimate buff." Jun-ho shivered as he pictured his unimaginable stats when he defeated the Frost Queen. His highest stat had been speed, which was at 225, and his lowest had been magic, which was at 183. Even then, they were pretty high, but if all my stats are over 270, his eyes sparkled. 270 was the minimum, if he got a lot of items and leveled up a lot. He pictured the Frost Queen. She had an enormous amount of magic, and every time she waved her hand, the entire land would freeze over. He can get that power. No, he can get even stronger than that. At that level, melting the ice statues would be a piece of cake. Seo Jun-ho sorted his thoughts and stared at the 4 ice statues in front of him. After standing there for a long time, he quietly left the morgue. When he stepped out of the museum, his eyes were filled with a newfound determination. 10th floor? Easy. Was he trying to reach the last floor to save humanity? Or perhaps to save the world? Seo Jun-ho knew better than everyone else just how selfish he was. He had but one reason to return to being a player. "I'm going to free my friends from the ice," that was all. He buried this promise deep into his heart. The next day, Shim Dyaku visited him at the hospital. "What? You're going back to being a player?" Shim Dyaku's eyes grew wide in surprise when he heard the unexpected news. Seo Jun-ho looked up from his hearty Xiaoliantang. "Why are you so surprised?" "There's really nothing that I can do aside from being a player," Jun-ho exclaimed, but then again Dyaku said it's not a great idea. Jun-ho asked why not to his friend. Dyaku said he want Jun-ho to rest up, and also it's because of the fiends, players who use their awakened powers to commit crimes and commit murders, terrorism without a second thought to sate their desires. They're like tumors in society. Fiends had no interest in clearing gates or hunting monsters. The fiends have been causing all sorts of trouble these days, Shim Dyaku explained. "How fun, they were too scared to show their faces when I was around." But things changed after the second floor opened. "We don't have CCTVs or satellites in Frontier." In other words, they had no means to survey and suppress fiends. Shim Dyaku looked squarely at his friend and said the 5 heroes also disappeared. The object of their fear was gone. With no one to put them into their own places by force, the fiends were able to run around and do whatever they wanted. "I think I understand why you don't want me to come back." Seo Jun-ho slowly nodded as he said this. If Shim Dyaku's words were true, Seo Jun-ho could die anywhere at any time. The fiends had been training for 25 years and he would be nothing but prey in their eyes. Jun-ho scrunched his nose. He'd wanted to level up comfortably while enjoying the privileges of being a hero, but now things were more complicated. "So, that's why you should just retire. The only way you can go back to being a player is if you throw away Specter's mask and name, but you have no reason to do that. You'll be treated like a king wherever you go, and the best players will be guarding you 24/7. Jun-ho said the 10th floor. "You see, I have to go there." Dyaku asked why with a confused look. By now the Seo Jun-ho he knew would have been creating a schedule to collect all the rewards he deserved for saving the world. "Do you have another way to clear the volcanic region on the 3rd floor?" Seo Jun-ho asked. Dyaku told there's only one solution, but with a surprise he heard Jun-ho told he had a solution. Shim Dyaku's eyebrows furrowed. His friend wouldn't joke about a topic like this. Dyaku shouted at him in surprise and asked about the explanation, and Jun-ho explained that he ate it. There was a sudden silence, but after understanding what Jun-ho said, Dyaku shouted and couldn't believe his friend ate the necklace. Shim Dyaku stood up looking like he was about to rip Seo Jun-ho's stomach open. Seo Jun-ho trying to calm him down, saying, "You're as impatient as always, hear me out first." "You really ate it?" Shim Dyaku shouted again. "Hey, it's not like I ate it because I wanted to. I automatically started to absorb it when I touched it. So what was I supposed to do?" Seo Jun-ho complained. "Ugh, my doctor told me to avoid stress." Shim Dyaku laid his head back and massaged the back of his neck. He spoke a moment later with a haggard look. "You're not the type of person to say something unnecessary. You do have a solution, right?" "Yeah," Jun-ho nodded and explained. "After I absorbed the nucleus, I got the frost skill, so he can freeze the altar on the 3rd floor." Seo Jun-ho was confident. It was an EX rank skill. After all, if it didn't work, even the Frost Queen's nucleus wouldn't be enough. Shim Dyaku nodded in understanding. He didn't doubt Seo Jun-ho at all. After all, the latter had defeated the Frost Queen when everyone else said it would be impossible to do so. If his friends said it was possible, then it was definitely possible. At the same time, he understood why Seo Jun-ho insisted on returning as a player and said, "This is related to your comrades, right?" With smile Jun-ho said, "Yeah." Dyaku said he will erase all the memories of the doctors who has seen his face. Seo Jun-ho liked talking to Shim Dyaku because his friend could read between the lines. Seo Jun-ho said his level was reset, so he is in level 1 right now, with his stat 2. Dyaku said he always say the bad news last. Shim Dyaku rubbed his aching forehead. He pulled himself together and tried to approach the matter optimistically and said, well, in a way, that's good news. People will be expecting you to be as strong as before. They probably couldn't even imagine Specter being level 1, while Jun-ho agreed. You can get me a player license with your authority, right? Jun-ho said.
Oh, that. Shim Dyaku's face darkened.
Since the second floor opened, the guilds have become stronger than the worldwide player associations.
What, you can't issue licenses anymore? Jun-ho asked with depressing look.
Dyaku explained it's not like that. When players test for their license with the association, people from guilds will also participate in the evaluation. Players can only get their license if they get approval from the entire panel of judges. Even with my power, I can't give you a free pass. Well, that's annoying, Jun-ho exclaimed. If you think about how chaotic everything was back then, we've come a long way in establishing proper procedures. In a way, this could be an opportunity, Shim Dyaku said with shining eyes. He spoke excitedly. Think about it, if you want me to fully support you, you need to prove yourself first. Oh? In other words, Dyaku was telling him to score highest in the examination. If he proved that he was a skillful player that caught even the guild's eyes, then Shim Dyaku could give him unabashed support from the association. Shim Dyaku advised Jun-ho not to use darkness and frost skills. Jun-ho said he understand darkness, but why frost? Dyaku explained the fiends know that the key to clearing the third floor is a skill associated with ice. Nothing good will come out of attracting their attention. Alright, I got it. Seo Jun-ho stretched his neck as he lay on the hospital bed. He is excited to see what kind of gear should he use for the exam. He couldn't use his high-grade weapons because of the level and stat requirements, so he had put them away in his inventory. Dyaku said Jun-ho can choose his weapons on the day of the examination.
Jun-ho grinned and said it'll be refreshing to be evaluated after all that he've been through.
I'll create a bio for this Seo Jun-ho character, birthday, personal history, relationships. It seems that I'll be busy for a while, Shim Dyaku commented. How long will it take? Seo Jun-ho asked. Dyaku told about 4 days. When do you think you'll be ready? In a month. Jun-ho looked confused when he heard that. What did he need all that time for? 1 week. That'll be enough, he told with confidence. Seo Jun-ho sat with his eyes closed and legs crossed inside Hanguk Hospital's rehabilitation room number 12. His comrade Ramadat had taught him that the lotus position could help with magic circulation. He will train this week. A week passed quickly. During that time, Seo Jun-ho trained his body and memorized all the documents that Shim Dyaku gave him to catch up on all the things that had happened in the past 25 years. He rolled his neck and changed his clothes. Today was the day of his examination as well as his discharge. Seo Jun-ho got in a taxi and headed to the Korean Player Association building. He saw the 80th-floor building was designed with an elegant curve and a large crowd of people was already gathered at the entrance. They were all here to register for the player licensure exams. Seo Jun-ho was already registered, so he didn't have to wait in line. Please sit in the waiting room and come in when it's your turn, an employee instructed. Seo Jun-ho checked his ticket, number 75, he would have to wait for a while. The mood in the waiting room was more casual than he expected. The exam didn't have a limit on the number of people who could pass. Every examinee could pass as long as they were talented enough, so there was no need for them to compete with each other. Seo Jun-ho sat down on a chair and crossed his arms. He closed his eyes but kept his ears open. He listened in for information that wouldn't be on all the formal documents that Shim Dyaku gave him. After hearing all the conversation, he found there's nothing too useful, but one thing is clear, that the world is now peaceful. Seo Jun-ho gave up on gathering information and opened his eyes. Right on time, an announcement was made that the examinee number 1, please come in. A hologram screen appeared in the middle of the waiting room, showing the inside of the testing room. A moment later, it showed the examinee picking a weapon in the armory, a spear. The man looked nervous as he gripped the long spear, but it didn't matter, because the exam began right away. Hologram monsters appeared and charged. The man swung his spear in wide arcs as he approached them, and the monsters took a step back. Some comments came like, wow, he's pretty enthusiastic. The monsters are stepping back because they're scared. I'm jealous, I bet number 1 will pass easily. The other applicants admired his movements, but they didn't know any better. Seo Jun-ho shook his head. A spear was most efficient when there was a distance maintained between the user and their opponents. The fact that the man was using the spear to close the distance meant that he knew nothing about the weapon. Unsurprisingly, the monsters suddenly charged at him in a do-or-die way. He fell and the battle concluded. The monsters disappeared and his face revealed his shock as he received failing marks. So that's how they do it. Seo Jun-ho's body was already itching. He wondered if killing the hologram monsters would feel like the real thing. The judge's room was set up quite peculiarly. There was a glass window that looked into the testing room, and behind it was a plush sofa where 10 people sat. They commented, this one's not very good either. It seems like they didn't study up on the monster's traits and fighting methods. That should be the bare minimum they should be doing as a player. I think we should fail them. The guild's judges began to speak all at once, however they weren't as stubborn as usual, they presented their opinions carefully as they observed the reactions of one person, they failed them. The Korean Player Association had lost a lot of its power but Shim Dyaku was still the president, the other judges were careful not to offend him. Send in the next one, at Shim Dyaku's order, an announcement was made and a new examinee walked into the testing room, the judges squinted as they saw. They commented, there's always someone that does this is more excessive than usual, a sword, bow, throwing knives, a spear, and even a handgun, he really must have swept through the armory, damn bro just looted the armory and bring it all to the test. Some judge commented, seeing how skinny he is, it also looks like he doesn't know how to take care of himself and said he is a copycat of Specter. Just like they said, the new examinee looked like a Specter copycat, they weren't uncommon among novices, copycats would walk around carrying multiple weapons, trying to imitate the weapons master Specter. Shim Dyaku snorted as he looked down at the testing room, he told Jun-ho to stand out but this is too much. The Specter copycat, Seo Jun-ho, looked around the room and wondered. The exam will now begin, as soon as the message ended, monsters started to form, Jun-ho think it's cool in person to see the hologram. The hologram monsters looked like the real thing, Seo Jun-ho's eyes sparkled in wonder but he had already finished analyzing his opponents. 20 dwarves. It would be pretty difficult for novices, that was probably the reason why only 3% of the examinees passed the player licensure exams. Dwarves had an average height of 130 centimeters, they were much smaller than the average man and they were definitely weaker as well. However, just as the players knew it, the dwarves themselves were well aware of their physical disadvantage. Dwarves are clever and they play dirty, what they lacked in strength, they made up for with tricks, spite, and tenacity. If you underestimated them like the first examinee, you'd lose your balance as soon as you let your guard down and in a real battle, it would be over as soon as you fell to the floor. They would stab daggers all over their enemies' bodies. The dwarves looked upon Seo Jun-ho with hostility and he grinned back and thought this reminds him of the old days. Seo Jun-ho was reminded of his past as he looked at the ugly dwarves drooling at him, the world sure has gotten a lot better, they didn't have this back then. License exam? Hologram monsters? They didn't have any of that. If you wanted to become a player back then, you had to risk your life by going into a gate. If you survived, you'd get a license, and if you died, not even your corpse would remain. Back in his day, you actually needed to put in the effort, a lot of it, in fact, surviving required effort and so did killing monsters and even if you worked hard, you could still die if you got unlucky. That was simply how players lived. As someone who lived through that era, Seo Jun-ho thought that these hologram monsters were downright ridiculous. They'll probably attack if I did this? Seo Jun-ho twisted his back a little, creating a false opening, the dwarves let out a grotesque cry and ran in. 1.5 meters, the spear in his hands was about 1.3 meters, combined with the length of his arm, he could control an area with a radius of 1.5 meters, of course the bits of data in front of him wouldn't know that. The four impatient dwarves rushed over, gripping their daggers in their hands, they jumped toward him, aiming for his head, but just as they were about to reach the peak of their jump, Seo Jun-ho had less muscle than the average adult, but his biceps suddenly flexed, just as the dwarves were about to hit their target, his spear struck out like a flash of light, piercing through their heads. Before their bodies could fall to the ground, they scattered into geometric shapes before fading. The dwarves lost their enthusiasm as they saw their comrades fall to the ground, they stopped their approach and scattered. So the dwarves scatter when faced with a strong opponent, they've got the details down. Seo Jun-ho struck his spear into the ground and said, but even if you do that, it won't do anything. He pulled out the 5 throwing knives with his left hand and held out the Glock 17 with his right. As the 5 throwing knives flew out one after another, he fired his Glock, 5 with knives, 4 with the Glock. 9 dwarves disintegrated in the time that it took to blink, the 7 remaining dwarves backed away, trembling. Seo Jun-ho shrugged off his bow and knocked an arrow, the dwarves started to shriek and run away, full of fear. Since they were small and nimble they were difficult targets for novice archers, but the one who taught him how to shoot a bow and a gun was a famous marksman, Gilberto Green. As Seo Jun-ho drew back the bowstring, the dwarves started to run even faster. Despite being holograms, their fear was very realistic. He closed one eye and took aim, his body formed a perfect T as he adjusted his position, looking like a picture from a textbook. The arrow that had been shot with only a moment's notice buried itself into the back of the dwarf's head. The surprising thing was that the dwarf had been running in a zigzag motion, but Seo Jun-ho wasn't satisfied yet. He quickly reached for another arrow and knocked it onto the bowstring. He fired 3 arrows in a row and 3 of the dwarves disintegrated. With that, Seo Jun-ho lowered his bow to the ground and placed his hand on the sword's handle. He had fought with the sword for the longest amount of time and it was thus the weapon he had the most confidence in. Perhaps the dwarves had realized death was inevitable even if they ran. The remaining 3 dwarves ran towards him with bloodshot eyes. Even as they got closer, Seo Jun-ho only caressed his sword and didn't unsheath it. He looked 1 meter away and drew an imaginary line on the ground. That was the reach of his sword as well as the dwarves' lifeline.
The moment the dwarves crossed their lifeline, Seo Jun-ho smirked as his fingers wrapped around the sword handle. The blade flashed like lightning. With one clean swing, their heads went flying. Seo Jun-ho's skills were undeniably sharp, but as he lowered his sword, he couldn't help but feel frustrated that his senses had become very dull. Obviously, his current skills were incomparable to his golden days, and that wasn't all. His muscles and bones were screaming after he'd pushed them to their limits in such a short amount of time. He couldn't help but sulk. He thought he will have to train more if he want to go into gates, and then we heard number 75, Mr. Seo Jun-ho, you pass. After seeing this amazing show of power, everyone is utterly shocked and amazed. They commented he's amazing, I don't know what else to say. After seeing Seo Jun-ho's exam, the judges couldn't hide their excitement. They usually sat back on the sofa looking bored, but the fact they had jumped up and stuck to the window to watch and showed how elated they were. Someone commented I was wrong. He's not merely a Specter copycat, he also has a balanced physique. Based on appearance, he looks weak, like he doesn't have enough muscle, but I didn't know that it was possible to move like that at his level. The judges couldn't stop admiring his skills, but among them Shimdyaku was the only one that was silent, but he eventually spoke and said, looking at his profile, it looks like the only skill he has is weapons proficiency, and it's only D rank. Everyone was shocked by that. The excitement died quickly as the judges went silent. Someone commented, it's not even a sub-skill, if his only skill is D rank. I don't know if we want to put that many resources into training him won't be that cost effective. The judges finished doing the calculation in their heads. They would have considered scouting him to their guilds if his skill was at least C rank, but it was D. Of course, if they invested enough into him and he got lucky, he could become a top-level player, but guilds only cared about profit. They didn't necessarily want to take him for themselves, but it would be a waste to give him to another. Seo Jun-ho didn't know about this, but that was how they felt. Shimdyaku watched quietly, taking a relaxed sip of coffee, and think the guild scouts had decided that he didn't have enough growth potential, but he almost feel bad that they hid his abilities. Seo Jun-ho was a top-level player that could control darkness and ice. Not only that, he had a good variety of powerful skills. Even his weapons proficiency D was actually weapons mastery A. He thought he should get the window cleaned when the exam is over. Shimdyaku placed down his cup, smiling victoriously. In home, Shimdyaku signed his name on the final document of the day and cleared off his desk. He couldn't help but smile when he was done with his work for the day. Then, he looked up. He. Man, this novel's hilarious. Shimdyaku's face fell as he was brought back to reality. Seo Jun-ho was laying on his sofa, eating chips and drinking coke while reading a novel. He's the most respected player in the world as well as the most popular role model. Was it okay for him to act like that? Shimdyaku let out a long sigh and walked over and said, what are you reading? Jun-ho explained the main character's a priest, but all they do is fight instead of healing. What a crazy priest. Dyaku took a seat on the opposite side and tapped on his Vita. A few documents appeared in the air. He told to take a look at that. It's the stuff he asked him for. Oh? Jun-ho peeked up from over his book, eyes sparkling. He closed it with a thump and sat up, looking over the hologram documents. Wow, this is just what I needed. You're the best, Seo Jun-ho exclaimed in excitement. Shimdyaku looked a little repulsed and asked, whatever, why do you need these? You're not thinking about going into these gates, are you? Seo Jun-ho said of course he will go, but Dyaku shouted and told him not to go because making a mistake inside a gate means instant death. Players who entered uncleared gates wouldn't even leave corpses behind when they died. If Seo Jun-ho didn't think that he could clear a gate, he wouldn't attempt it in the first place. When it came to hunting, he always made logical decisions after analyzing the situation, not letting his emotions sway him. Why are you so worried? Aren't the uncleared gates troublesome for the association? Seo Jun-ho asked. Dyaku said they are, but that doesn't mean that I want to send my friend somewhere dangerous. In the time that Seo Jun-ho had been away, the only thing that Shimdyaku had gained was worry and age. He looked at Shimdyaku and sighed, sorry for ruining the heartfelt moment, but I'm going because it's beneficial for me. Beneficial? How so? Shimdyaku asked. Gates give more EXP as more time passes. Gates that had remained uncleared for years would have a lot of EXP piled up as rewards. So the only reason you're going inside uncleared gates is that you can level up a little faster, Dyaku asked, but Seo Jun-ho corrected, saying it's the fastest way. Shimdyaku argued, saying can't he just train safely and clear normal gates? He wants to level up because he is fast as possible because he wants to go to the second floor. Only players level 30 and higher can take the dimensional elevator and go to the second floor. Seo Jun-ho's current goal was to reach level 30 as fast as possible. When he saw how serious Seo Jun-ho was, Shim Dyaku nodded heavily. He didn't think that far, he didn't know that you were under that kind of pressure. Actually, that's not the case. Frankly, he just wanted to punish the fiends for not knowing their place. Of course, Seo Jun-ho didn't bother to correct his friend now that he had finally calmed down. Then, for your first gate, as Shim Dyaku scrolled through the documents, his eye twitched when he saw there's only one uncleared gate that lets in players at level 1. This gate had first appeared 7 years ago and had killed 142 players thus far. It was known as the Novice's Grave, and it only let in level 1 players. The name of the gate itself was also ominous. The Curse of Dawn, Seo Jun-ho read. He shrugged. Based on the name, it'll probably have zombies or something. Shim Dyaku said he'll have to survive until the sun rises in order to clear the gate. That's nothing, Seo Jun-ho shrugged. Of course Seo Jun-ho had the skills to back it up, so Shim Dyaku couldn't say anything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card, holding it out to Seo Jun-ho and said this contains your signing bonus. It was the money that Seo Jun-ho would receive for signing a contract with the Player Association. Is this funny to you? Do you want to get bossed around by your underling? Seo Jun-ho asked. The signing bonus was 200 million won and his annual salary was 1.5 billion won. On top of that he would also receive an incentive to clear gates and would receive additional pay based on their difficulties. The terms of Seo Jun-ho's contract were unheard of for a novice. Seo Jun-ho asked if he can live at the association for time being. Dyaku said it will be safe, so do as he liked. The association headquarters had at least 100 players milling around at any given time and the building itself was also protected by a magic barrier. No one in their right mind would even consider attacking it. Seo Jun-ho considered this and made his decision. Jiku said he will get the entire floor if he make a name for himself. With that, Shim Dyaku stood up and picked up a massive box in the corner, struggling to carry it over. He wiped the sweat from his brow and nodded toward the box, saying to open it because there is gear for him. Seo Jun-ho's eyes widened. He immediately opened the box. Inside was an armor set made of his preferred leather. He picked it up and said it's light. Seo Jun-ho ran his nails across the surface and nodded in approval. And it's pretty sturdy too. This is a lot better than he expected. Jiku said it's made by Kwon Noya's work. Junho's jaw dropped. Kwon Noya was the world-famous blacksmith that had wielded his hammer only for Specter. He is surprised to know that old man is still alive and he is 98 this year. It's been a while since he handed off his workshop to his grandson, but he's still as healthy as always. Junho said he will go meet him sometimes, but Dyaku told not to go because they just need to avoid the eyes of the fiends and the guilds, and they've been watching the workshop. It wasn't surprising that people had started watching the workshop after Specter had returned. If Seo Jun-ho made his way to the workshop to meet Kwon Noya, it would only arouse suspicion. After all, there weren't many people who could meet the blacksmith in person. Junho understood that and said that makes sense. Seo Jun-ho felt a little sad that he couldn't meet the old man right away. Although Kwon Noya kept on grumbling and was stubborn every time they met, Seo Jun-ho still valued their friendship. He will raise his level and meet him another time. Seo Jun-ho looked head down at his scrawny arms. That old man nags even more than Dyaku. If Seo Jun-ho went to him in this state, he'd never hear the end of it. He smiled and stood up from his seat. Dyaku said he can choose any weapons he wants and seriously asked when he is planning to go to the gate. Seo Jun-ho said originally he wanted to go right away, but he changed his mind after the licensure exam. He got exhausted after fighting only 20 dwarves. A gate, an uncleared gate at that, would be much harder to defeat than 20 dwarves. He will have to train himself and he told he need to reach the bare minimum. Seo Jun-ho closed his eyes to think before he opened them again and said 10 days. He'll aim for that. The time quickly flew by. Qianmen Mountain in Namyangju was just outside of the safe zone. This was why a gate had appeared there 7 years ago. A self-driving car came to a stop in the parking lot of Qianmen Mountain, which was right next to the gate. A man who appeared to be in his 20s stepped out of the car. The man was Seo Jun-ho, who had grown slightly bulkier in the past 10 days. He was still scrawny, but his eyes gleamed with a different light than before. In front of him stood a blue oval that was 4 meters tall. It's the gate. They were mysterious portals connected to other worlds that were crawling with monsters and riddled with traps. Once you were inside, you couldn't trust anything. The only thing you can trust is yourself. And in order to trust yourself, you needed the skills to back it up. Seo Jun-ho knew this better than anyone, so he worked hard to train his body up over the past 10 days. It was insanely difficult. From the moment he woke up to the moment he went to sleep, all he did was train. He had even replaced his meals with nutritional supplements. In order to maximize his body's efficiency, there was nothing he could do but train so intensely. Thankfully, his hellish training had paid off. And we saw the status of Seo Jun-ho, level 1, title bringer of spring, strength 25, stamina 27, speed 31, magic 18. Though he hadn't been able to raise his magic stat, he had been able to raise his strength stat from 21 to 25, his stamina from 24 to 26, and his speed from 27 to 31.
It's better to raise his stats as fast as possible before I get stronger. The higher your level and stats got, the harder it became to raise them through training. With it he entered the gate named Curse of Dawn, where clear condition is survive until the sun rises. Seo Jun-ho stepped through the round blue portal and into a different world. The landscape around him transformed. He had stepped into another world's graveyard. From the dirt under his feet to the overgrown trees and weeds, everything looked different from Earth. Seo Jun-ho closed his eyes and took in a deep breath. The air was heavier than anywhere on Earth. It soothed him. Whenever he breathed in, he felt like every single cell was waking. He looked around and asked gate information. A hologram window appeared before him, summarizing the details of the gate. Name is Curse of Dawn, required level is level 1 and lower, party cap is 10, clear requirement is survive until the sun rises, difficulty is average. He thought the same thing while doing his research, but the requirement isn't very difficult to meet. Surviving until sunrise should be easy. When he looked up at the sky, the sun was already starting to set. It wasn't uncommon for gates to have a different flow of time from the outside. He came right on time. It's a good thing he did some research beforehand. Even while training, Seo Jun-ho made sure to research the gate. He found that the parties who entered in the morning survived the longest, so he did the same as them. The parties who came in past noon must have had a hard time. Players reached level 2 as soon as they cleared their first gate, but this one required entrance to be level 1. In other words, every player that had attempted it had never been inside a gate beforehand. If complete novices entered an unfamiliar environment and they had to start fighting right away, it was only natural that they would panic. They would only be able to exert about half of their full power. He wondered how many there'll be, but Seo Jun-ho was completely prepared. He knew he could give even more than his 100%. As the sun set, darkness covered the graveyard entirely. Seo Jun-ho looked up at the starry night sky, thinking to himself, he is getting an ominous feeling. He felt an eerie energy spilling from the graveyard. It was the presence of the undead that caused this. Once you experienced it, you could never forget it. It feels like his skin is crawling. He hated. Seo Jun-ho sighed and looked around the graveyard, guided by the light of the stars and the moonlight. Just then the ground began to shake. Dozens of hands started to break through the soil. They're actually zombies, Seo Jun-ho said dryly. He unsheathed his sword. The best time to kill them would be now. Seo Jun-ho stabbed cleanly through the zombies' heads as they started to crawl out of the ground. Even though zombies were especially tough, they would die if he injured their brains. Now that he look at it, there's actually a lot of them. Not only that, but the night made it harder to see. Players hated fighting in the dark inside gates, but there was always an exception to the rule. A massage came. The night has fallen. Hunter's knife has been activated. All stats increased by 10%. All your senses have been enhanced. In this case, Seo Jun-ho was the exception. He could win at any time of day or night, which was why people called him undefeatable. As his senses sharpened, his sight also improved and the hazy, moonlit silhouettes became clear outlines of zombies. Seo Jun-ho chuckled as he saw the dozens of corpses begin to surround him. A strange party was unfolding in the moonlit graveyard, but instead of music, there was the sound of zombies being cut down, and instead of fireworks, there was the spray of blood. Fighting zombies wasn't as simple as the movies made it out to be. They moved faster than most adults and they don't care about protecting themselves. Zombies didn't care if their limbs went flying because they couldn't feel pain. All their energy was put into attacking. In other words, they were the worst possible opponents for inexperienced players. Their attacks didn't even reach Seo Jun-ho. The only attack pattern they had was charging at their opponent and trying to bite them, so they were no more than moving punching bags to him. He slashed with the association sword and thought the association sword is better than he thought. Seo Jun-ho had received a standard issue sword from the association, but it was of higher quality than he expected. Thanks to that, he didn't have to overexert himself trying to cut off the zombies' heads. Every time moonlight reflected off the blade, a zombie's head would go flying. So far, he had counted 40 of them. Even with his skills, if they completely surrounded him and didn't leave any room for him to swing his sword, Seo Jun-ho would be exposed. The moment 3 zombies approached from behind him, Seo Jun-ho shot them with a Glock 17 specifically designed for monsters without even turning around. Their heads exploded like water balloons as the bullets ripped through their heads. It's a good thing they're zombies. If they were orcs or something stronger, he would need to imbue the bullets with magic to pierce through their hides, but since he was up against rotting corpses, the normal bullets were enough. Even though zombies were the perfect soldiers because they didn't feel pain or fear, they weren't perfect weapons. This was why experienced players weren't afraid of them. If you want to be the perfect weapon, you have to be able to kill anything, he remarked. Zombies would lose their advantage when they were up against players of a certain caliber like right now. Jun-ho glanced at his watch. 3 hours had passed since the battle started. There were only 4 corpses that were still moving. He wanted to go home and shower, so hurry it up. Perhaps the zombie had understood him, but one of them charged him with a pungent odor coming out of its mouth. Seo Jun-ho wrinkled his nose and held up his hand, firing a bullet into its chin. He didn't even check that it was down before he turned around and swung his sword. He cut through 2 zombies and threw his sword like a knife. It pierced right through the last zombie's skull, the remaining momentum propelling it into a tree. The zombie twitched a few times before it went still. Seo Jun-ho retrieved his sword from the tree, shaking off the blood. He looked around the silent graveyard. It was good that he brought the Glock 17 over because he would have had a harder time otherwise. He had counted over 50 zombies crawling out of the ground during the fight. Seo Jun-ho felt like he'd forgotten something. He shook his head and opened his status window. He saw that he had already leveled up twice. Despite not actually having cleared the gate yet, he made the right decision to come to an uncleared gate. He couldn't help but smile.
Is anyone there?
A weak voice called from somewhere. Seo Jun-ho's face fell. It was a female voice, breathing heavily like its owner was about to pass out. Not only that, but the speaker was using Korean.
He asked, where is she? He heard again someone calling someone, here, over here. Thank you. Seo Jun-ho sensed that whoever he was speaking to desperately wanted to live. She called out. Her voice was getting weaker and weaker. He asked, is she down there?
The girl voice said yes, she is. She is there. The voice came from a tombstone at the edge of the graveyard. Seo Jun-ho dug through the dirt with his bare hands, revealing a mahogany coffin. He asked her to wait. The girl told she came in here 2 days ago with her friends. She thought they could make it big if they conquered an uncleared gate. Seo Jun-ho asked her to shout so he can locate the exact location. The woman inside the coffin seemed to consider this for a second before she let out a loud cry. Ah. Seo Jun-ho face lighting up, so her head is down here. He pulled out his gun and fired at the bottom of the coffin. Bang, 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 bang. He emptied the chamber and unsheathed his sword. Something lifted the broken coffin, spilling blood. The wretched monster couldn't believe and looked betrayed. After all, it had been killing hundreds of players over the past 7 years and had never once been caught. Seo Jun-ho pointed his sword at the monster as it cried out in pain. He don't trust others very easily, especially not inside gates. He pushed his sword through the monster's head. He snorted as he watched its corpse fall. There wouldn't be any survivors inside a gate anyway. If there was even a single player remaining in a gate, it wouldn't open. The novices that it had killed probably knew that as well. But sometimes the heart betrays the head. Seo Jun-ho had begun to doubt after fighting the zombies. 50 zombies would definitely be hard to defeat, but it shouldn't be impossible for a party of 10. But the gate had remained uncleared for 7 whole years. It was suspicious. With a tricker, it makes more sense. Trickers were much stronger than zombies and could even absorb the memories of those it consumed. It had probably picked up Korean from all the Korean players that had attempted to clear the gate. It was pretty clever for a monster. It even hid in the coffin to hide its presence. Of course, that hadn't mattered this time. System messages appeared with a ring. All hostile monsters have been killed. This is considered as meeting the clear requirements. You have cleared Curse of Dawn. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. All stats increased by 2. For magic stats have been restored. As expected, the uncleared gate gave a lot of good rewards. He also recovered some of his lost stats, so he can regain stats at every 5 levels? It's not that much, but it was still something. Seo Jun-ho was satisfied with the 4 stat points, especially because he needed to raise his magic stat the most, but his eyes were still sparkling, expecting something more. That can't be it for an uncleared gate, right? As if to answer his question, additional messages started to appear saying you have received the skill Confession of the Dead Sea as a clear reward. The gate will automatically disappear in 1 hour. Even though it was an uncleared gate, Seo Jun-ho hadn't expected anything better than a rare grade item. His guess was wrong, but rather than being disappointed, he broke into a grin. He wouldn't mind being wrong 100 times if he received a reward like this. He immediately studied this skill's effect. Confession of the Dead, great as C, effect is allows you to look into the memories of the target. However, it only works on dead life forms. It lets him look into the memories of the dead? Like psychometry, it was likely one of the memory reading skills, but the conditions were much stricter, so he can read the memories of the target, but they have to be dead. He could see it being useful to him in the future, but it wasn't a versatile skill. Suddenly he realized why the gate had dropped such a skill. He thought it's because of the tricker. The tricker was a monster that could steal the memories of a dead target, and gates was more likely to drop rewards related to the monsters within it. He'll have to do some research to see how he can use it the best. Most importantly, with this he was starting to acquire new skills that the previous Spectre didn't have. Will he get stronger than before? He could barely imagine such a future. He looked up at the bright starry night sky with a small smile, craving a cold beer. Next day breaking news started to spread. The so-called novice's grave, the gate Curse of Dawn, has disappeared overnight. Who is the mysterious player who cleared the uncleared gate? Rookies from guilds deny any connection. It's been noisy ever since that guy showed up, mumbled Shimdiaku with a grin on his face. He was relieved after hearing that the gate had been cleared. Not only that, but it'll be fun to watch those guild bastards be put on the spot. Even for the top guilds, clearing an uncleared gate wasn't easy. They didn't want to put their promising rookies in danger, and those of higher levels couldn't even enter them. Shimdyaku asked if Junho was going to reveal himself. Junho said be patient, it's not the right time yet, but it's such a waste. If they reveal it, he'll be famous in no time and his value will go up. Junho asked, why do you think people buy luxury goods when they're all mass-produced in the same Chinese factories? That's right, because it's a luxury item that not everyone can have. Shimdyaku questioned if he want to become a luxury item. Seo Jun-ho shook his head because he doesn't want to be just any luxury items. He'll be like a legendary, limited edition collaboration item that everyone wants but can't get. Dyaku revealed he will get them riled up is what he is saying. He had already cleared one uncleared gate after all. Some perceptive people would definitely catch on and they would most likely think, won't they have to go to another uncleared gate? Afterward, they would start camping out in front of them. At that time, Seo Jun-ho and Shimdyaku wouldn't have to raise a finger and would be able to casually reveal themselves. It wouldn't be dignified to make a big deal of announcing himself, Junho said, but Shimdyaku jokingly asked since when did he care about dignity? Shimdyaku grumbled to himself, but he couldn't deny that it was a good plan. It was more effective to let the rumors spread on their own than to claim it themselves. Shimdyaku asked if they need anything else, does he? But the Seo Jun-ho said there's one thing, there's only one uncleared gate left in the country. So he wants to clear the big countries like China, Russia, or the United States still had a lot of uncleared gates. They want to get rid of them and Seo Jun-ho wanted to clear them. Since they had the same goal, sending him wouldn't be an issue. Not only that, but he might even receive a hefty sum and establish an international reputation for himself. Shimdyaku said leave it to him, he'll negotiate the best conditions possible. Shimdyaku's eyes sparkled. Tremble, Seo Jun-ho's arm convulsed beneath him, his sweat had formed a puddle on the floor. He was doing a one-handed handstand while doing slow push-ups. His back was straight and such actions were a great display of balance. His right arm felt like it would collapse under the weight of his entire body, but he pushed on. He had to get past this, he had to get past the idea that his mind and body were one. He was well aware that doing so would let him move to the next floor. Thus, Seo Jun-ho channeled all the strength in his body and pushed against the floor with his right hand while counting 71, 72, 73. His body screamed as he collapsed in exhaustion, his hand trembled at the taste of freedom. At the same time, a wide grin spread across his face. His strength has increased by 1. After training for 2 days and nights, his strength stat had finally increased. It was an exhilarating discovery after pushing his body to the limits. He let out a final breath and sat up. He tapped on his Vita as he chugged down a glass of water with his back against the wall. He heard a news that India's top rookie was unable to clear it in the past. When will the uncleared gate be conquered? Is it okay to leave the uncleared gate Lufsgarden alone like this? The crack is growing bigger. It doesn't seem like there's much time left until it completely opens. Breaking! Lufsgarden has reached 124 failed attempts. List of all fallen players. Will the player who cleared the Curse of Dawn challenge Lufsgarden? Spotlight piece. Seo Jun-ho felt strange as he skimmed the articles. Lufsgarden, it had first appeared 9 years ago and was Korea's oldest uncleared gate. Both the government and the association had tried everything they could to try and clear it. The government, the association and the guilds pooled together their funds and offered 1 billion won. The prize amount was unheard of. For that reason many parties had attempted it. For a total of 124 attempts, 124 failures, and 0 successes, Lufsgarden refused to fall into the hands of the humans. Seo Jun-ho continued to read through the articles. In the past, the Korean Player Association declared that there weren't enough qualified players to challenge uncleared gates. They made a startling decision during a conference. Using the prize money, they hired India's rising star, Tushar Vishi. According to what he read, Tushar Vishi's abilities were amazing, but Seo Jun-ho was still unconvinced, so he watched a few videos of how Tushar Vishi trained. Jun-ho complimented saying he's good. Tushar Vishi's form was perfect and he could shoot arrows with amazing speed. If he had continued to grow like that, he would have surpassed Green, but Vishi failed. And that failure resulted in his death. He was 22 years old, with a bright future ahead of him. In the end, not even a trace of him was left behind. It was still a sore spot for both Korea and India. Seo Jun-ho closed his eyes and sorted out his thoughts before he reached for the spear leaned against the wall that he is going to bring that. The spear was a cheat weapon that could dominate a battlefield if only a perimeter around the user was established. The monsters in Lufsgarden probably have shield skills and a large attack area. A sword wouldn't have enough reach and bullets wouldn't be able to pierce through their hide. Seo Jun-ho said status window, and with that we saw he is now level 5 and expect magic. All of his stats were now over 30 points. With these stats, he is stronger than most people who are level 10. He was likely the strongest level 5 player in the world right now. The 26 magic stat also let him start using the frost skill. It'll be his first time using it in real combat.
Seo Jun is feeling something. He wonder what is that feeling, is it fear, or is it anxiety? When Seo Jun-ho looked into the mirror, he saw none of those things. In fact, he was grinning like a child on Christmas Day. Luf's garden was located in a remote town named Chiakian in the Jingbu township of Pyeongchang County, Gangwon Province. After safe zones had started to appear across the world, gates had stopped forming in populated areas. After entering in the Luf's garden, Seo Jun-ho can't stop himself but admire this place. Jun-ho scanned the picturesque scene and said pretty trash. Anyone who didn't know about Luf's would have quickly refuted his claim. How could anyone call these beautiful flowers trash? But once the sun set, those flowers would become vicious monsters. They were Luf's, creatures hiding under the guise of flowers. Jun-ho casually swung his spear. Compared to the spear he used to use, it's really bad. After all, the spear he used to use was a unique raid weapon. Compared to that, the spear he was currently carrying had a crude design and the center of balance was slightly off. Even though Seo Jun-ho had used all kinds of weapons, he simply couldn't say that this was a decent one. He spun the spear elegantly. After practicing for the past 2 days, he had gotten used to the weapon's weight. He said gate information and all the information popped up. The maximum number of people who could enter Luf's garden was 4, which was probably why Seo Jun-ho was the first person to ever go in alone. Even India's super rookie brought 3 of his own team members. That meant that their teamwork must have been impeccable in battle. The fact that they still failed meant that there had been some sort of deadly trap. Seo Jun-ho turned his gaze over the garden. Beyond it was a 3-meter-tall maze made up of winding branches and ivy. There's probably some kind of trap hidden there. Seo Jun-ho walked down the dirt path, careful not to step on any of the flowers. He sat down on the bench in the middle of the garden. All he needed to do was to wait until the Lufs awakened. It's a good thing that he bought some ebooks. He laid down on the bench and opened the fantasy novel he had downloaded on his Vita. He continued to read until the sun set. Seo Jun-ho watched the sunset and turned off his Vita. He stood up. They should be coming soon. Lufs were monsters that looked like flowers. However, their structure was the complete opposite of normal flowers. Their elegant petals were at their feet while their stems faced upward. Their thick stems twisted around several times to create humanoid shapes. Such were the Lufs. They looked like people on dark nights like these, so they were nicknamed flower ghosts. A system message came like the night has fallen. Hunter's Night A has been activated. All stats increased by 10%. All your senses have been sharpened. As Seo Jun-ho's senses sharpened, he closed his eyes and focused on the sounds around him to check the results of his training. He heard something twist in the ground. During the day when the sun was out, Lufs hid underground with their petals facing up in order to lure prey. That was why Seo Jun-ho had been careful not to step on any of the flowers and only took the dirt road. If you approach a Luf without a second thought, it'll catch you with its vines and drag you underground. But the night wasn't any safer. When the moon rose, Lufs would crawl out of the ground to hunt for prey themselves. Lufs have strong, durable stems, so they have a high defense, but they were also slow and had a clear weak point, the flower at their feet. There's only 2 so far, even for a simple greeting. That's boring for Seo Jun-ho. He still had his eyes closed, but his keen senses informed him of what was going on around him. He grasped their formation and dashed toward them, gripping the top and bottom of the spear's shaft. The Luf swung its arm like a whip toward the charging human. As soon as he felt an interruption in the airflow, he buried the spear into the ground and flung himself like a pole vaulter. The movement served 2 purposes. First, he would be able to dodge the Luf's attack perfectly, and second was 1.5 meters. It let him measure the optimal distance for using his spear. After wasting the attack, the Luf was now completely defenseless. Seo Jun-ho ducked, spinning around like a top as he swept the ground with his spear. He landed a strong kick on the Luf, and it stumbled backward. Seo Jun-ho dashed forward and struck its chest with his shoulder, and it fell over with a heavy slam. He stepped back casually as the Luf's arms stabbed sharply into the ground in front of his feet like knives. He is in pretty good shape today. He grinned and changed his grip on the spear, holding it in the middle. At the same time his magic circuits started to heat up. I probably won't be able to control the strength. It's my first time using it in a real battle after all. As soon as the words left his mouth, the temperature around him started to drop. Frost energy covered his spear point and he opened his eyes. They had finally adjusted to the dark. Seo Jun-ho studied his spear. It looks the same as when the Frost Queen used it. Of course it would look the same. This power belonged to her, after all. This feels weird to him. It was impossible to put into words how strange it felt to use the powers of an old enemy that he had fought with his life on the line. He wants to know the firepower of that skill. He had previously used the Frost skill several times in the training hall, but he had never been able to test it on a real monster. This was the first time that he would test its true power. The Luf on the ground suddenly shot out its arms. Seo Jun-ho ducked slightly, barely managing to avoid the attack as it sliced off a few of his hairs. His biceps tensed.
In the next moment, his spear pierced through the air. He stabbed twice into the Luff's feet, into the petals. As soon as the frost energy made contact with the petals, it spread and froze them over. When he struck the frozen petals again, they shattered into dozens of pieces. The Luff couldn't scream, but it writhed in pain, looking like a fish out of water. A message came saying, "You have defeated a Luff." He's surprised to see he already killed it. He is dissatisfied, even though he had aimed for its weak point. Weren't Luffs famous for their durability? Did he really kill it with only 2 strikes? His eyes were cold as he looked down at his spear point, thinking it's even better than he expected. Freezing the petals before shattering them would be the best way to take care of them, but he can't keep using it. He had just consumed about 1/5 of his magic power in the battle. Next time, he'll try using only a little bit of magic. It would be less effective, but he would be able to use the technique for longer. Seo Jun-ho sorted his thoughts and looked toward the remaining Luff. It approached him slowly, twisting both arms into sharp points, dual wielding. It's really cool. The Luff struck out its sharpened arms as if emboldened by the praise. Seo Jun-ho's spear flowed swiftly like water, and he blocked its attack. The Luff's weapons were sharper, but Seo Jun-ho was more skilled with the spear. When it failed to connect, the Luff pulled back and retreated. But Seo Jun-ho didn't let the chance slip by. His hands slipped down to grip the very bottom of the shaft, and he spun using the momentum to swing it like a club. He struck its temples like an axe hitting firewood. As he thought, "It's sturdy, a person would have died from this attack," but the Luff simply shook it off. It only seemed to be angered, and it started to swing its sharp stems wildly. No matter how strong Luffs were, a strike to the head could still affect it. It was starting to lose the vigor and speed it displayed earlier. Seo Jun-ho dodged with a light step and launched a counterattack. He swung his spear again, hitting the same spot on its temples. He hit it once more, swinging even harder. He struck the Luff's head several more times. It was too much for the Luff, and its stem head was cut off, hanging by a string. Another message came saying, "You have defeated a Luff." When the battle ended, Seo Jun-ho looked around. The anxiety started to creep in again. Of course, it wouldn't end with only 2 of them. It's an uncleared gate after all, for new Luffs crawled out of the ground and started to approach him. It's a monster wave. A monster wave was a phenomenon in which monsters came in continuously like tidal waves. He wondered how many this one will have. Seo Jun-ho casually spun his spear in his hands, waiting for the Luffs to come. There still wasn't a single drop of sweat on his forehead. In the darkened garden, dozens of humanoids were chasing someone. They were coming at him from all sides. Seo Jun-ho's face twisted as he watched the attacks come in. He couldn't hold his frustration back any longer. He swung his spear with his right hand and held up his left. A thick, well-crafted ice shield grew out of his left hand. From above, the Luff's attacks rained down like bullets. The ice shield blocked 12 attacks before it shattered into pieces. As the ice shards began to obscure his view, Seo Jun-ho poured magic into his legs and leaped into the air. This was uncharacteristic of him because he was usually careful with his magic expenditure, but that was how bad things were going for him. As he flew into the air, a Luff ambushed him. He quickly tried to dodge its attack, but it grazed his left shoulder and right side. Blood spurted out from his side. When the first 2 Luffs came out, Seo Jun-ho merely snorted. When 4 Luffs came out after that, he was grinning, but when 8 appeared after the second wave, his mood started to change. The number of Luffs isn't doubling every wave, is it? Nah, that would be overkill. Unfortunately, he had been correct. He cursed, "Damn it, why is he always right about these things?" In the 4th wave, there had been 16 Luffs. When he was trying to catch his breath after defeating them all, 32 Luffs appeared without a moment to spare. After fighting for over 2 hours, his breath had turned rough. If he had neglected his stamina training, he probably wouldn't have made it this far. He can't believe he is getting cornered by Luffs, of all things. When he get back, he is doubling the amount of training. Seo Jun-ho pulled himself together and scanned the area. Ironically, as his mental and physical stamina started to approach their limits, his battle instincts and senses seemed to become even sharper, as if they were filling some little cracks in his body. Thanks to that, his idle thoughts vanished and his concentration sharpened like a blade. If it broke for even a second, his head would go flying. Seo Jun-ho's body moved swiftly, taking carefully controlled movements that wouldn't waste an ounce of stamina. He dodged each attack that rained down on him. Of course, it wasn't his style to simply keep dodging. He swung his spear with all his speed, strength, and fury. It cut off the heads of 4 Luffs. Of course, the magic also left his body with the attack, and the resulting shock made his face turn pale, but even with this, there were still 15 Luffs left. He will have to keep going. He didn't have a choice. He had to do this or he would die. The spear's shaft was slippery with sweat, but he gripped it tightly. It would take time and a lot of stamina, but he had to kill them all. If I run away to the hedge maze back there, I'll probably be able to take a breather. But he didn't know what traps were waiting for him there. Not to mention, once he entered the maze, he would have to fight these monsters in a tight space. It would be the optimal battleground for the Luffs, considering that they had high defense and long vines. He will have to end it here no matter what, determined. Seo Jun-ho let out a sharp breath as he stepped off the ground. 2/3 of his remaining magic power receded like a falling tide. He gave up on efficiency, opting to maximize his destructive power. The moonlight glistened on the frozen spear tip. 32nd, that's all he had. He couldn't maintain it any longer than that. Seo Jun-ho charged forward, without even a moment to think. The frost-strengthened spear couldn't be considered a normal weapon with how sharp it was. It cut through the Luffs like butter. Seo Jun-ho attacked the enemies that filled his sight. The technique was strong enough, but he didn't have time. He only had 24 seconds left. Seo Jun-ho made a bold decision in the blink of an eye. He would sacrifice something small in order to reap a greater benefit. Seo Jun-ho dashed forward, allowing the attacks to hit him as long as they weren't fatal. Blood poured from his arms, thighs, and back, but during his reckless attacks, he managed to take out 9 whole Luffs. Anyone would have admired his skills, but unfortunately, there was no third party here to watch. After completing this great feat, sweat and blood poured out from all over his body. With a trembling hand, Seo Jun-ho froze his injury. There were only 6 Luffs left. His mouth tasted salty with sweat and his arms and legs trembled relentlessly, but he refused to let go of hope. He is Bringer of Spring. If he just grit his teeth and get through with it, he can win. Bringer of Spring increased his stamina and magic power recovery rate by 500%. As the Luffs approached him from 6 different directions, Seo Jun-ho gripped his spear once more and 6 Luffs attacked him. The darkness faded. Daybreak washed the garden in holy light. He said he is fucking tired. The magnificent dawn filled his sight as Seo Jun-ho lay in the flower beds. He stood up using his spear like a cane. He planted his trembling feet into the ground and brushed off the dirt on his butt. He looked around with a tired face. The garden was still dotted with traces of the night's fierce battle. At that moment, a system message rang in his ears like you have cleared Luff's garden. Instead of being happy, Seo Jun-ho felt suspicious. The clear requirement for this gate was to defeat all the monsters. Of course, hunting 62 monsters were no easy task. But not if there were 4 players. It wasn't hard for each player to kill 15 of them. Seo Jun-ho stroked his chin, locked deep in thought. He read up on all 186 players who have entered this gate in the last 9 years. They were mostly novices, but India's super rookie was among them. Unless the info was inaccurate, he would have been able to kill 40 Luffs all by himself. As long as the 3 others weren't completely useless, they definitely would have been able to clear the gate. But why did they fail? Seo Jun-ho was missing something. His eyebrows furrowed. System message came like you have received a blood flower as a clear reward. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. All stats increased by 2. 5 strength stats have been restored. The gate will automatically collapse in 1 hour. The new messages crowded his view. Seo Jun-ho's eyes widened as he read them. He hadn't been expecting much from the clear reward because gates of this level didn't usually give anything particularly great, but the blood flower? A grin crept into his face. He got lucky. Blood flowers already had a very low chance of appearing in gates and they only bloomed after feeding on people's blood. That was why it was called the blood flower. Seo Jun-ho had heard rumors about it, but this was the first time he had actually gotten one. Item information, he muttered, pulling the blood flower out of his inventory. A hologram window appeared. Blood flower, great is rare. Description is a peculiar plant that becomes a special herb upon feeding on human blood. The effect changes depending on the number of petals. Effect is gain 1 magic stat upon consuming a petal. Seo Jun-ho laughed heartily, his face stretching like a Buddha statue. He even felt like he would be willing to talk to those tabloid journalists now. From what he remembered, blood flowers gain 1 petal per year. The gate had first appeared 9 years ago, but the flower only had 7 petals. Perhaps it had bloomed late. Seo Jun-ho immediately popped it into his mouth. The sickening taste of blood covered his tongue. System message came like magic has increased by 1. Magic has increased by 1. Magic. Seo Jun-ho smacked his lips as he finished off the petals. It tastes horrible, but I'd eat another one if I could. The reward was more than worth it. He said status window and all the information was there in the background, and we saw there is a drastic change. Seo Jun-ho is level 9 now. Title is Bringer of Spring, strength is 34, stamina is 35, speed is 39, and magic is 37. Even though he had spent the entire night massacring the Luffs and ended up clearing the gate, his level only increased by 4. This was because leveling up required more EXP. The higher one's level became, all his stats increased by 4 because he leveled up and he got 7 more magic stats from the blood flower. In a single night, his magic stat increased by 11. He won't have to worry about his magic power for a while. His next battle would be much easier. Seo Jun-ho grinned and turned around. He wanted to get to their cores. He went around the Luffs' corpses, swiftly collecting their cores and putting them into his inventory. When he finished, he headed toward the maze instead of the exit. Up close, it was much bigger than it was from afar. The height made it considerably intimidating. It was currently morning, but he wondered how it would have felt if he faced it at night while being chased by Luffs. Seo Jun-ho was suddenly glad that he didn't make the decision to escape here. As Seo Jun-ho entered the maze, he occasionally froze the ground so that he wouldn't lose his way. The ground was covered in all kinds of weapons and equipment. He quickly scanned them. None of the equipment caught his eye. As he turned toward a different path, he gasped. There, a skeleton was leaning against the wall. Next to it was a notebook and a bow. This was what he had been looking for. Seo Jun-ho slowly approached the wall, carefully picking up the fallen bow. It was covered in dust, but it was a perfectly intact, high-grade bow. Yes, this is Tempest Butterfly. Tempest Butterfly was named as such because the arrows it fired flew dizzily like a butterfly, and the sharp winds it caused were like a tempest. It's not as good as Final Horizon, which was found in some historical ruins on the second floor, but it's a good bow. Final Horizon was a bow for sniping, and it was said that it could fire an arrow to the end of the horizon. However, it was currently in the hands of a fiend who obsessively collected bows, so Seo Jun-ho didn't really care about it. Seo Jun-ho stared at the bow for a second and looked up. He realized the identity of the skeleton. Tushar Vishy, a rising player from India, Seo Jun-ho said a silent prayer for him saying thank you. If Tushar had felt spiteful enough, he would have placed Tempest Butterfly into his inventory before he died. If he had done that, the rare grade bow would have disappeared forever, but he didn't do it. He supposed the reason for this will be written in this notebook. Seo Jun-ho carefully opened the old, weathered notebook. The contents were written in neat English. This is a journal. Tushar Vishy's entire story was written inside. The entries were written with the date and time. Since Seo Jun-ho was proficient in English, Japanese, and Hindi, he had no problem reading them. In April 7, 2044. 12:40 p.m., I've received a request to clear the Luffs Garden in Korea. The reward is unthinkable for a mere level 10 player like me. People keep telling me to reconsider, but I can't let this opportunity slip by. In April 23, 2044. 4:12 p.m. I'm nervous. We're going into the Luffs Garden tomorrow. All my practice arrows hit bullseye. I have a good feeling about this. In April 24, 2044. 11:37 a.m. We finally entered the gate. My teammates are fellow comrades who I've been fighting with since we were level 1. We scouted our surroundings. It's so beautiful that it's hard to believe that we're inside a gate. In April 24, 2044. 8:33 p.m. When night fell, flower ghosts came crawling out of the ground. This gate's pattern is a monster wave. On the first wave, 8 Luffs came out. We joked and laughed as we killed them, but in the second wave, 16 came out. On the third, there were 32. When 64 came out on the fourth wave, we gave up on killing the Luffs and ran away to the maze. If we defeat them all, I hope there won't be 128 after them. Damn it, this gate is crazy. In April 25, 2044. 5:29 a.m. The dawn is bright. We somehow survived the first night. The Luffs that were chasing us crawled back into the ground, but one of my comrades died because he lost too much blood. We made him a grave as promised and buried him. I swear, this day is the longest of my life. In April 25, 2044. 7:12 p.m. The sun will set soon. I hope I can write another entry tomorrow. Oh great Shiva, God of destruction, grant me strength. In April 26, 2044. 2:48 p.m. I collapsed as soon as the battle ended. I barely have any feeling in my fingers, so it's difficult to even lift a pen. We killed the remaining Luffs from the night before, but the fifth wave began after that, and there were 128 Luffs. I'm not exaggerating, there really were 128 of them. We nearly died while fighting, and now there are only 40 left. Once the sun sets, I can even hunt them all by myself. Tomorrow, we'll be able to leave this accursed gate. Wait, there won't be a sixth wave, right? In April 26, 2044. 5:02 p.m. Fuck. That fucker. One of my teammates was a fiend. How did he manage to trick us? He attacked me from behind. I killed the dirty fiend, but he cut my left palm while we were fighting. I can't feel my left arm. I can't lift a bow like this. My last comrade heard the commotion. The color left her face when she saw. Now there are only 2 of us. I'm worried about tonight. After reading all the journals, Seo Jun-ho's eyes softened sadly. The next entries were written with unstable handwriting. He could feel the urgency in the ink. In April 26, 2044. 6:58 p.m. I ran without looking back. My comrade was fighting for the 2 of us because of my injury, but she was eventually killed. Damn it. The tears won't stop. I'm scared. What do I do? I'm so scared. My entire body is shaking. When I finally stopped, I was faced with a dead end. I also stepped on a trap and now my leg is bleeding. It's getting harder to keep my eyes open. I think this will be my grave.
I can hear the looks coming, they're getting louder. If someone finds this notebook, please tell our families that we're sorry. Perhaps the loofs had taken some time to come because the entry continued. Seo Jun-ho was able to guess that it had been the case because the handwriting at the bottom was even rougher, and the contents were filled with deeper resentment and anger. There wasn't even a date and time anymore. If I survive, I'll kill all those fucking fiends, they're the cancer of humanity. Oh great Shiva, let all those sinners burn in hell. I offer my soul to you. Someone, anyone, take vengeance for this pitiful warrior. After that, the next few pages were filled with nonsensical cursing, but the last page had another change in tone. It seemed to have been written by someone with a clear mind, ready to accept death. The handwriting reverted back to Tushar Vishi's neat style. In April 27, 2044. 12:01 a.m. I am still alive. I will put down my notebook and pen and lift my bow, even if it's with my teeth. O goddess of war, O god of archery, show me the great miracle of the butterfly once more. That was the final entry. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like there had been a miracle. If there had been a miracle, Tushar would still be alive. Seo Jun-ho's questions were now answered. The number of loofs increases depending on how many players enter the gate. A shiver went down his spine. If he had entered the gate with 3 unqualified players, they would have faced a total of 248 loofs by the 5th wave. Even he don't know if he'd be able to handle that, especially if he had to carry 3 extra players on his back, who knew that the best way to clear this gate is to come alone. Seo Jun-ho had been the first person to enter this gate alone in the past 9 years. After people kept failing, the predecessors were scared and always entered with a full party of 4. Seo Jun-ho calmed himself and stood up. He scrolled through his inventory. He always carried a certain item, just in case. He pulled out a bottle of cheap liquor and poured it over the skeleton. Hindus believe in reincarnation, right? He hoped Tushar were reborn in a nice place. Seo Jun-ho said a short prayer for Tushar. After paying his respects, he checked the information on Tempest Butterfly. System message came like Tempest Butterfly, grade is rare, force of arrow increased by 250%, a fierce wind will be created around the arrow when fired, use requirement is level 10, 45 strength, 45 speed. Even though the world had become like a game, there was no attack stat or anything attached to weapons. As long as you landed a good blow to the head or the heart, it would do the job. Damn, I want that bow. The Tempest Butterfly's effects were great, but Seo Jun-ho didn't express his usual excitement out of respect for Tushar Vishi. He don't have enough strength or speed stats, so I won't be able to use it right away. Of course he could wield it if he wanted to, but since he didn't meet the usage requirements, the item effects would be null. Seo Jun-ho looked down and said he will definitely get his revenge on those damned fiends. He gave a sad goodbye to him saying farewell India's young hero. Seo Jun-ho turned around and left the gate.